For the first time in months, President-elect Donald Trump held a press conference on Wednesday to cover a variety of issues, but mostly to discuss how he plans to avoid using his presidential power to increase his fortune. Trump's attorney outlined a long list of restrictions and provisions designed to separate Trump from his business empire, but does his plan go far enough? For the answer to that question, we turn to attorney and ethics professor Wendy Patrick. Welcome back, Wendy.
Thank you for having me.
There was a table full of folders that everyone was buzzing about at Wednesday's press conference. Trump finally revealed what was in those folders. Take a listen.
These papers are just some of the many documents that I've signed, turning over complete and total control to my sons.
So there you have it. Those folders were apparently a lot of paperwork that he signed over. Trump just loves his props. His attorney, Sherry Dillon, laid down a long list meant to protect Trump from any conflicts of interest. Some of those things are shifting his assets so that they're controlled by his sons, Don Jr. and Eric. Trump, no more foreign deals for him. And domestic deals will be overseen by an ethics advisor. And any profits from foreign officials staying at Trump hotels will be donated to the U.S. Treasury. Wendy, are these steps sufficient enough?
Well, only time will tell, because as the president-elect seeks to move from the boardroom to the situation room, he's going to have to switch out that hat from the business magnate to the commander-in-chief. And in doing that, one of the things we worry about is that perceptions influence reality. And that is one of the reasons he's taking all of these steps. Now, whether or not it goes far enough depends on who you ask, because I've heard lots of business ethics experts go on TV and say absolutely not. But we don't know yet, because nothing's happened. He's not even the president yet. So what we're going to have to wait and see is whether or not these divestments, and I use that term loosely because legally he's not divesting his interests, this relegation, if you will, of the control to his family members is in fact going to no doubt still be to his benefit. If the answer is yes, many would argue that creates at least very much the appearance of a conflict of interest.
Right, because having his two sons run the business, I mean, he's still going to be in contact with his sons. He's still going to be seeing them regularly. They are his family. So,
yeah, that's right. And what distinguishes this Trump administration from others is Trump has a very close-knit family. Now, that's a good thing in the grand scheme of things. But it's problematic when it comes to who are you going to give your business assets to. I mean, there's no way he can have a blind trust, and divestment just isn't practical. I mean, he spent his whole life acquiring assets. Many people even think it would be unfair to say give up everything in order to assume this role, given how successful you've been. Nonetheless, even Mr. Trump wants to make sure that he runs this country ethically and puts the interests of the American people first. Nobody is disputing that. That is one of the reasons he used that prop that you mentioned. We don't know what those papers were. We'll take him at his word. He signs a lot of documents in order to try to divest himself of those at least day-to-day operational interests. Is it far enough? Only time will tell, but we hope that he can make it work for the sake not only of the office of the president, but for the sake of the American people.
Right, and as you said, only time will tell. He did mention something interesting. He said, well, I could actually run my business and be the president, but I'm not going to because that just doesn't look good.
There's not enough hours in the day. We always joke that Donald Trump is awake for most of each 24-hour cycle, but there is no way. It would be divided loyalties. And that is something that the ethics rules take very seriously. In other words, you don't even need to be able to point to a particular statute or canon of ethics to understand that divided loyalties is problematic. And you can't have that when you're the commander-in-chief. The fact that everybody agrees on that is part of the reason we're having this discussion in the first place, not because there's any particular law we can point to that says the president cannot have these conflicts of interest, but because common sense, everybody understands that you cannot have a conflict of interest, either legally or ethically, and that is the reason this was a focal point of the press conference yesterday.
Right. Trump is subject to the Constitution's emoluments clause. That's an anti-bribery provision that forbids the president from accepting presents, offices, titles, pretty much anything from a king, a prince, or some type of foreign state. Well, time will tell if he ever violates that, but how transparent does he have to be?
Very transparent. And interestingly, Danielle, that is one of the most Googled items of the day yesterday was that clause. Everybody wanted to know what it was. He has to be very transparent. And some would argue he hasn't been transparent enough. Perfect example, he still hasn't released his tax returns. That's the kind of thing that maybe isn't the most important thing on the minds of most Americans. They care more about jobs, healthcare, national security, a strong border, et cetera. But we do want transparency because if we can't trust somebody in one area, it really spills into all others, just like personal relationships. And so that's one of the things that Donald Trump has vowed to do in the future is be very transparent. Interestingly, that's also a theme of each of the confirmation hearings that are currently ongoing is this issue of transparency. It's got to be front and center in his administration. He's vowed so far it will be. We'll see if it is.
Right, and many of his nominees are actually being much more transparent than he is. There's a lot of documents and tax returns and things that they're turning over that Trump isn't required to.
You know, it's true, and it's also true that Trump's business dealings are so complicated and have been. He has amassed so much of his wealth through a variety of different business dealings. Now, we know this because of all the lawsuits that he's been involved in the past. He has lots and lots of business dealings. One can only imagine how complicated his tax returns are. But that's even more reason that Americans want to see them. That's even more reason that people want to know, well, what kind of holdings does he have? Who does he donate to? So once he does, he said that he will eventually release these tax returns. We already have some of them having been leaked. But he really has to think about the ways in which he can be even more transparent once he becomes president.
Right. You mentioned those tax returns. A reporter asked him about those. Here's how he responded.
Well, I'm not releasing the tax returns because, as you know, they're under audit. Oh, gee, I've never heard that. I've never heard that. I've never heard that before. You know, the only one that cares about my tax returns are the reporters. Okay, they're the only ones. But no, I don't think so. I won. I mean, I became president.
So, are reporters the only ones who care about tax returns, Wendy?
No, more than reporters care about them. The real issue is, in the grand scheme of things, how important are they? How much do we care about his tax returns as opposed to or in connection with all of the other things he's promised to do as president? He's made a lot of promises, everything from building the wall to making sure that we beef up national security, to keeping jobs in the United States, to repealing and replacing Obamacare. When you look at all of the promises he's made, what he probably means to say that in that grand scheme of things, American people probably don't place looking at his tax returns in the top 5, maybe not even in the top 10. But they do care because, again, it reflects on his transparency and all the rest of the areas. After all, people voted for him because they believed he was going to do what he said he was going to do. So one of the things he said he was going to do is release his tax returns. If he doesn't do that, can we believe the rest of the promises? That
right, Trump not only
that issue in connect everything else.
Trump is not only the first billionaire president, he's the first to not to release his tax returns in decades. There's a reason, I believe, for that tradition. What about past tax returns that aren't under audit? Could he disclose those?
Well, if he wanted to, but those 2 points you made are interconnected. He is the first billionaire, and maybe that's why he's always under audit. Is the first billionaire to run for president. And maybe that's why he's been consistently under audit. And maybe that's also why he is plays more close to the vest when it comes to what's in his tax returns. He is unique in so many different ways. The unprecedented nature, not only of his candidacy, but of his transition and of his, first couple of years in office at least. Maybe he'll be there all 8 years and we'll get to see consistent tax returns. But the problem is, due to him being such an unconventional candidate, that necessarily spills over into many of these other issues. Now, there's a debate in the tax law arena as to whether or not that should reflect whether or not he can release his returns, whether he's under audit. Now, he said he's under audit every year, but he's no longer under audit, as you point out, for past years. So why doesn't he release those? Hopefully somebody will ask him that, because it's an excellent question that hasn't really been vetted in the way his current tax returns have been.
He also said you learned very little from tax returns. Is that true?
It depends on what, the particular person whose tax returns you're looking at. With Trump, I'll bet we'll learn very much from his tax returns. You or I, or maybe some other typical Americans that maybe just have one or two jobs or just a small amount, a handful of business dealings, you might not learn very much. But Donald Trump, his tax returns probably cover so much ground that no doubt there'd be lots to learn.
Right, and some have alleged that he could be hiding a bombshell in there. We may never know the answer to that.
Totally boring, and he's just being ultra conservative and releasing them. Maybe he's leading up to finally releasing them, and there's nothing here to see, folks. Who knows?
He's full of surprises. That could very well be the case. Wendy, Patrick, thanks so much for weighing in.
Thank you for having me.